Welcome to another Glenbrook Podcast. You'll be pleased to know that this series keeps on going. We were hoping to draw it to a close reasonably soon, but lots of people have been in touch and want to come on the Glenbrook Podcast, and lots of our colleagues are going to take up the mantle and interview people as well. So I'm thrilled that we're keeping going. And today is somebody I've been trying to get on the podcast for a long time, but she's just too busy around the world and being busy setting up her own business and everything else. I welcome Louise Emmott from Kingsdene. In fact, she's the managing director of Kingsdene. So with Louise, we're going to follow the usual format, which is have a chat about her how she got into property and her background of coming into property, chat about her education, and then look at where the career went and how she ended up setting up her own business, how difficult it was setting up her own business, and what the background is to Kingsdene and the plans for the future for Kingsdene. And then we're going to go into a bit of detail into the residential property market, but going back, looking at how that market's changed in Manchester specifically, and look at the 2005 boom, the 2008 crash, and then the resurgence of residential PRS market into the recent years. And we're going to end, like we always do, having a talk about how Louise keeps herself busy outside of work and her passions outside of the office. So welcome to the Glenbrook Podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming and joining us. And if we weren't careful, we nearly caught you at your previous career. So we're pleased that you've set up Kingsdene and you're now in the new job. Tell us about Kingsdene and we'll go back to the interesting stuff about family and how you got to where you are. But let's hear a bit about Kingsdene first of all.
Yeah, so Kingsdene is a year old this month.
Ooh.
So that's very exciting. And it is really just everything I was doing at JLL. So my previous job was at JLL. And I got the opportunity to do an MBO and buy the team and the business I was running at JLL out of JLL and set up our own business. So, yeah.
And
exciting.
Your office is splendid on Deansgate?
Yeah, so we're on the estate agency row, as we call it, on Deansgate. And then we've also got an office in Leeds as well.
When I chat to lots of friends, I was having breakfast with somebody you'll know last week who's not, they're based down in Essex. They said, I let my property through Kingsdene. And I was like, oh, I know Kingsdene. So you touch a lot of people actually that we know, but wouldn't know that we have mutually friends in common. So
we have landlords all over the world.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I've got so many questions already. But let's go back to the start. So how do we know each other? I think that's probably the first thing, is that probably through James Lassalle and Steve Hogg is the common person. So tell us a bit about, in terms of your career with JLL, but let's go back a little bit before and growing up.
Growing up, I'm a farmer's daughter. So I've always lived on a farm from being a baby, and we moved from Derbyshire to Staffordshire and then finally to Cheshire when I was 14, which was possibly the worst time in a child's life to move house, let alone move farm, move counties.
Moving farm's a big deal as well.
Moving farm's a very big deal. Even at 14, the chaos.
Yeah.
It took months.
All machinery as well.
Well, we've got a dairy farm.
Okay.
So we literally milked our cows in the morning at one farm, move them in during the day, and milk them at the new farm in the afternoon.
Oh my goodness me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole story around that. But yeah, it was absolutely. I lived in a caravan with my mum or my dad for about 3 months while we were doing the house. Like that whole summer holiday, I left one school obviously in July and then started at Poynton in September, and we were just backwards and forwards for 6-8 weeks during that period. So yeah, absolute carnage. But I think growing up on a farm, it gives you a really strong work ethic.
Yeah. There's no downtime, is there?
There is no downtime. It's the hardest job. What you don't realise how hard
I was thinking this only on Sunday, and I was on the roads and I saw tractors, and I was like, literally, there is no downtime. When you don't clock on at 9 and finish at 5:30, there's no downtime.
No, you get up at 4:30.
Yeah.
You're lucky if you go to bed at 10.
Yeah.
Depending on what's going on.
Is this Kingsdene now or being a farmer?
Well, yeah, no, my entire life. It's really hard work, but it gives you some really good grounding, I think,
Mhm.
for life in general. Yeah, we never sat in watching telly. We were
Yeah.
always out helping. I used to sit on the steps of the parlour on a fertiliser bag or something to keep my bum warm or dry, and watch my dad milk cows.
Yeah.
That's just what we used to do.
And are the family still farming now?
Yep, we still have our farm.
Oh my Lord, really?
And my brother
Still dairy?
still dairy for our sins, and my dad still works far too hard for his age. And
Where does the milk go?
Arla,
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
They might shout at me when they say this. And Will, my brother, he runs that now with my dad.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So an amazing grounding being on a farm.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by dairy
you're
farms where I
similar.
live, so I see them all. When I'm switching off my lights, I can still hear the tractors going outside. So they'll go till 2:00 doing silage or whatever. So I completely get that. So how on earth did you go from being in Poynton? You finished school. Did you go then to university?
No, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life at all, really. All I knew was that I wanted to be in a job with a desk and be super organised.
A nice pencil case.
Yeah, I don't even know where this comes from. My dad's a farmer, my mum's an ex-chef, so I have no idea where this comes from. And I actually went to Buxton College and trained as a medical secretary.
Okay. Wow.
Very random, very random. My shorthand at the time was fantastic. But, I mean, I don't even know if anyone uses shorthand anymore. So I was a trained medical secretary, and then I very luckily got a job at Stepping Hill when I was only 17 because my birthday is the end of August.
Yeah.
So I literally left college in, I don't know, May, and got this job at Stepping Hill working for a consultant neurologist. And I was still 17 years old.
Wow.
Like, it's crazy. Very responsible role.
Yeah.
Writing up, notes from people with really bad brain injuries from this consultant neurologist.
Oh.
And I was just crazy. But I was, this sounds really bad, but I was working with quite a lot. I didn't think the NHS was a great career path for me at that time. I was working with quite a lot of older people, and I just wanted something a bit younger. So then I went to work at the airport for the Compass Group.
Okay, yeah, Compass catering side.
Yeah, as a PA to one of their directors. So that was quite exciting. You could go airside at the airport, because obviously
That's very cool.
they looked after all of the catering facilities, so you could pretty much go anywhere in the airport. I'm absolutely sure you can't do that anymore, but going back, a long, long time ago. And again, then just realised that probably wasn't where I wanted my career to go. And then I was temping for a little while, and then got a temping job working at JLL.
Oh, really?
For Ian Tomlinson, whose PA at the time had left, and then so he had a vacancy, but and then Steve Hogg's PA at Chesterton at the time was leaving Steve to go and work for Ian at JLL. So I was kind of and then I went to work for Steve at Chesterton.
Okay.
Really bizarre.
That is really bizarre.
Really bizarre.
That's very intertwined.
Yeah, and then to go full circle and end up back at JLL as well. It was very strange. So started working for Steve
In Manchester.
Wow. At Chesterton in 2002.
My goodness
then
me.
We got then obviously David Lathwood approached Steve about setting up a residential business at Kingsdene, which was when me, Steve, and then a couple of other guys, and the estate agency team actually moved from Chesterton to Kingsdene in September 2003.
And that's where it all started, effectively.
Basically.
That is amazing. It's nice to hear.
It's
nice to hear the story. Nice to hear something that isn't the traditional career path.
Exactly.
We didn't go to Oxford books, do land management, blah, blah, blah. So, that's really cool. So
convoluted story.
So 2003, you were working with Steve in Jones and LaSalle. Or was it King Sturge then, wasn't it? Yeah, so it was King Sturge. And then what year did it? Was it 2007, 8?
2011.
11?
Yeah.
Wow. So you were King Sturge until 2011.
Yeah.
And then
the merger.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then always been based in Manchester.
Always Manchester.
That's interesting. So the way I know Steve is through, you were selling One Park West, which was in Liverpool with Grosvenor, and then the merger happened. And yeah, it's fascinating to know about how the culture changed, everything changed, because King Sturge was a different culture, completely
different,
And did that, so there's quite a big gap there between 2003 and 2011. But in terms of that culture change, was that obvious on the residential side or less obvious?
Moving to JLL?
Yeah.
I think we all knew that it would be a very different business at JLL, and I said, I won't last here. I'll be here for 2 years and then I'll go somewhere else. This isn't for me. Just because I'd always be, King Sturge was such a family.
Yeah.
And we just looked at, it was just, everyone knew each other. We were a nice little small office, and it was just a family. So yeah, at that time I was like, this is not going to last. Like, I'll be here for a couple of years. I'll give it a go, and then that'll be the end of that. And then what? 10 years later.
Wow.
Well, longer. Yeah, 12 years later.
So 2003, where the resi world was, is a very, very different place to really where it was 5 years later, or even 4 years later in 2008 or whatever. Tell us what you guys were, what did it look like, the landscape in 2003? Who were you working for, and or what clients were you working for, and what did the landscape look like?
Well, 2003, if you look at the city today, you just wouldn't have recognised it. What are we, 21 years later?
Don't say that.
Completely different city, but still an incredible city.
Yeah.
I think at that time, we're going back a long, long time now. What were we working with?
Urban Splash, did we do anything for them, or did they do anything themselves?
Yeah, mainly themselves.
Dundara?
We'd done, it was like the Edge sort of days, NV buildings, those kind of days, GN Tower, although that was probably a little bit later. But yes, when you look back, we'd kind of, between sort of King Sturge and JLL, we'd been involved in most of the the majority of the resi schemes in the city.
All quite low scale in those
very
days.
low,
Yeah, so like 5 stories.
When the Hilton was built, that was,
Are we involved with Beetham?
No, we weren't involved with Beetham, but it was a landmark. Love it or hate it, it was a landmark.
Still is,
and still is. It's just now that there's been a lot of, developers who've pushed the boundaries, and we needed the density. But yeah, during that, I was Steve's PA at that point, and then I started to I basically worked in every single other department in the resi team. So I did a bit of work with the valuation team, so just to kind of find out where I wanted to go with. I knew that I didn't want to be a PA all my career, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I did a little bit of work in everything, really, just to kind of work out where I wanted to be. And King Sturge very kindly paid for me to do a diploma in surveying at Reading as well. So I did that distance learning.
Is that 3 years, over 3 years?
Yeah, I think it was about 3 years. But for me, that I prefer learning like that. Like, I like to be working, and doing university just wasn't for me. So that was perfect. And then I found a real passion for new home sales, which was when I started working predominantly in new homes. And probably my first real scheme that I looked after myself was Cypress Place for Lend-Lease down at Green Quarter.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of my very first schemes that I was helping Anthony Stancard with at the time.
Oh, yes.
So yes, I was working for him.
When would that have been?
Too late, like probably 2010, 2011, that kind of time.
Because I was going to ask you, one of the things I was going to ask you about was 2008 or 2000. So I have a pretty vivid memory because how bad it was in terms of Park West and in Liverpool. But the world sort of started to go crazy in 5, 6, and probably a bit of 7. But then it's actually pretty much switched off in 2007. And then 2008 was just completely dead and very, very painful. In JLL, what King Sturge at that time, what was any abiding memories from then?
So I remember us taking on. So I climbed Helvellyn 2 weeks ago, and was in Penrith, and I remember during that time we were just taking on any instructions, obviously, as I'm sure everyone did, like just to keep the lights on. And so we had an instruction in Penrith for Sainsbury's, I think it was, to look for these apartments that were being built on an old Sainsbury's site, or houses or something on this Sainsbury's site. And for some reason, I don't even know how we got this instruction, but we were looking after that. Like, I spent my entire life on the train to Penrith to just like doing a consultancy role, offering advice to the client while having a sub agent looking after the sales. And then also some random instruction in Blackpool as well. This looked like there was nothing going on in the city.
I can empathise. I was advised, even at Grosvenor, I took on some consultancy work for Newport City Council in Newport on some shopping centres that they had there. And you look back at it, you think, what on earth was Grosvenor? Yeah. Why was Grosvenor receiving fees from Newport Council?
But you literally just did anything you could.
Yeah.
You know, that's, you know, in a business, that's what you have to do. You have to adapt, and you have to do what needs to be done to keep going.
So 2011, you took on the new role on new home sales or new house sales around then.
Yeah.
And how did that manifest itself in the sense of you decided that was something you were really interested in, but your world must have changed quite a bit then in those years, and transitioning from being the secretary to being in
I'd done other things in between.
Okay.
Yeah, but like I'd obviously worked my way up through Kingsdene and then JLL.
But that sounded quite
that was
incredible.
And that's what I knew where my passion lies. I love like offering developers advice on what to build, you know, the mix, the specification, the purchaser profile. Like I really enjoy getting involved in all of that, in that side of.
And that's what the value is. If you don't get that right at the front end, your product's going to be.
Yeah. There's nothing worse than trying to sell a scheme that you've had nothing to do with, and you'd be like, I wouldn't have designed it like this. So I do think it's really valuable to have that input right from the outset.
We see that a lot with build to rent planning applications going in, where people go and put planning in, so they secure the consent. The scheme doesn't work, the scheme's not right. And we say, well, your value, you should have included a developer or an advisor in at the early stages, and they've gone off, the architect's gone designed something that isn't efficient, isn't buildable. And suppose it's exactly the same thing that you're advising your clients is making it saleable.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you want the best outcome, just get us involved from the beginning.
And those schemes, so that there was something quite, well, I think it happened before. So my memory on 2008 was that we were selling a lot of apartments, homes to Ireland. And Shannon in particular was working on the Liverpool job, and her job was running around Ireland, basically trying to find the people to complete on their on their exchanges. And but things then changed quite a bit in terms of, so the Irish market disappeared completely in 2008.
Literally overnight.
Farmers in Kildare disappeared who were buying 40 apartments in one go. But where did it change to then?
So then we really saw probably sort of early, like 2012, 2013, we really saw that influx of overseas investors, sort of Asian, sort of Asia Pacific investors and China. And that's when the market really changed.
Let's talk about the model for a minute, because I still learn something new every time when we talk about this. So they're buying off plan, and how they buy is interesting, which I'll come into in a minute, how you engage with them, how you find them, which I want to dive into. But they'll buy off plan a year, 18 months before the building's completed.
2-3 years.
Really? 2 or 3 years before?
4 years.
Really? And then when it completes, presumably they've got to get a mortgage or pay with cash, but presumably a mortgage.
Yeah, it was kind of 50-50, I'd say.
You might never see it. Might never see the property.
Might never see it.
And then they
generally never.
You guys, JLL or Kingsdene, as the managing agent, and you manage the property, let the property, manage the property, collect the rent, and do the inventories and everything else. So it's quite an unusual model, the fact they might never see the property.
Yeah, quite well. Yeah, most of them don't see the property.
It's incredible.
And quite and like you say, the model's changed dramatically from when we were first set. So the first scheme we ever sold overseas was Media City for Peel.
Okay.
And that was the heart number one. And we went to Hong Kong, and we were literally sat in an exhibition room. Like I'd never done this before. Like learning.
And was this at a hotel?
In a hotel. So you're in the.
Which one it was?
Yes, I do. I can't remember.
Peninsula?
Posh hotel.
Yeah.
It'll come back to me. So you sat in an exhibition room just with, well, we didn't even have a model, I don't think, of the buildings then, because they were already built, just with marketing panels all around the room, and like what they call dealer tables in the middle of the room, brochures, price lists, etc. A video of Media City that has this incredibly annoying soundtrack that you just literally can't get out of your head all day. And yeah, and it, at that time we actually had a Manchester United shirt signed by Gary or Ryan, one of them, because obviously James knew them. Like, and if you bought a flat, you got this United shirt. And it was pure, like Media City at that time was sold on Old Trafford. And that's where the international pull had come from.
I see.
And like today, I think one of the biggest pulls for Manchester is the football. What Manchester United and Manchester City have done for Manchester is incredible.
I think it's just pausing on that, and same for Liverpool as well. I think it's quite incredible that we work and exist in this city and I existed in Liverpool for 10 or 12 years beforehand. But actually, you can see no football at all. You can see no impact of the football, as in it gets busy the night and the morning after the football matches, but actually you don't see any of the players. You don't really hear about it. And it's amazing how I was in Hong Kong last August, September, and there was a Liverpool branded coach out there. I don't even know what it was doing, but it was a Liverpool branded coach. That pull, you wouldn't see a Liverpool branded coach in Liverpool, let alone Hong Kong. So you're going out there and you were talking the same language. And would you say, therefore, that, as in talking the same language about football and the teams they were supporting, so would it have been easier to sell an apartment in Manchester, Liverpool, than it would be, say, one in Brighton? Or that's incredible.
Because people have heard of Manchester.
That's incredible.
We sold, well, it was Liverpool actually. We were selling Man Island overseas with Countryside. And somebody came in the exhibition room and they were like, "Where is Liverpool on the underground?" Like, they actually thought it was in London. Like, somebody they didn't know about Liverpool. Like that.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I know.
And did you have interpreters then as well?
No, I mean, they generally, like Hong Kong and Singapore, they speak really good English. It was the Mandarin Oriental.
Oh, I know exactly. Yeah, it's across the water. So in terms of locations you sold in, Singapore, Hong Kong, into China?
Yeah. I've been to some very strange places in China.
So cities
I've been to Shanghai and Beijing.
Yeah.
Guangzhou.
Yeah.
Shenzhen.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is like, you feel a little bit like a spare part, because you don't understand, you don't know what conversations are happening between sort of the sales team, the in-house, like the JLL sales team, and the client, because they're all, I was just there for them to ask me any questions about the scheme. But you can't, in Hong Kong and in Singapore, you can get really involved with the clients because they can speak English. But in mainland China, it's very different.
Wow.
Very different. Yeah.
And has this, so I'm jumping around as usual, has this tailed off now? Are you still going abroad?
I'm not, no. Well, I think ever since COVID, sort of that a whole exhibition model. I used to be on a plane like every other weekend at one point, until I realised that I could take advantage of it and started to take some holiday in between these exhibitions. So I did actually get to see some really amazing places as well. But yeah, no, since COVID, the whole exhibition sort of style of marketing has really changed. And it needed to as well. It was quite
an old-fashioned,
quite archaic, really, when you look back. So now it's very much done. There's some real disruptors, as we've seen in the Manchester, in the UK property market, disruptors coming into the market. There's been a lot of disruptors in that market. So it's very much more sort of TikTok, Instagram, social media led marketing. And we're seeing a lot of, particularly in Singapore at the moment, it's very young, new investors coming to the market.
Really?
Yeah. So it is interesting to see how that dynamics changed completely.
So I remember on One Park West, we even had there was an exhibition in the NEC. We went down to the NEC to sell apartments, which I thought that's almost like the same concept that you were doing in Hong Kong, but in the UK, which sounds bizarre.
Well, there's a big one in London as well, isn't there?
Is there?
I can't remember what it's called.
Like a property investor show, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that. And then there's a huge one in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, Expo, like a UAE Expo. Really? Quite a lot of developers do go to.
From the UK?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, like Manchester developers have gone there, yeah. So yeah, it's just very different now. But we're still seeing quite a lot of activity from that off-plan market at the moment, because I think they're all hedging the bets that in 2 years, 3 years' time, interest rates will have come down. So that market is still very, very active.
You've touched on something very important there, is that's the hope in the market at the moment, is that in 3 years' time, when these schemes are completing, the world will have changed not completely, but it will have changed.
Yeah, I mean, we're never going to go back to those historic lows that we saw, and we probably shouldn't anyway. But that we're going to have to see a change.
What's the most units, homes that one single investor's done at one of these roadshows?
Probably 75 to 100.
75 to 100
Yeah.
apartments in one purchase.
Yeah.
That's
Not necessarily a roadshow, but
yeah,
just a Saudi investor or something like
incredible.
that. Just like, takes a few floors in a scheme. And
that's incredible, isn't it? And would they trade those before? Because what we noticed also is that they might well take 75 or 100, but actually they'll trade them to their friends, family, colleagues, and they'll be left with 10 maybe, which were free effectively.
Yeah.
And the other 65 will have sold on. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of them try request assignable contracts, so they can assign it before completion, and that's like one of the big things that you have to have in your contract.
Interesting. Wow, I could talk about this all day long. In terms of the opportunity that you got there at JLL, that journey has been absolutely phenomenal. In terms of the MBO in Kingsdene, how did that conversation come about? Because I'm amazed that that the presence existed for so long, because it's very, very different existence of the residential sales business alongside the commercial investment and advisory realm. And it's quite an old-fashioned model and very difficult to manage. And I suspect it only stayed there because you were keeping it, as a team, you were all keeping it not afloat because it was very successful financially, but it's a very difficult, different thing for London JLL to try and understand alongside commercial investment and things like that.
And they still have a big resi agency team in London. Yeah, we've got, JLL must have 8 to 10 estate agencies in London, so it does still exist in London.
Oh, I didn't know.
But obviously the fees in London are very different. It's much bigger books, so to speak. It was just a change in the way JLL sort of accounts for. They've moved to a global business line. And residential moved into capital markets. And it just didn't really fit their profile in the regions anymore. So we just saw an opportunity that it was a business that I've obviously worked really hard for so long. And it was an opportunity that I couldn't really turn down.
I think it was phenomenal. Yeah. And so loads of other questions. Kingsdene. Where does the name come from?
So Kingsdene is, the king is from King Sturge. So obviously that's where I feel my property career kicked off at King Sturge. And I have so many fond memories of King Sturge. And then Dean we're obviously on Deansgate in Manchester. So, and the River Dean, spelled Dene, used to run on there.
Okay, I've learned something. Yeah.
So that's Kingsdene.
Fantastic.
So, and we just thought it was very apt. I didn't want a name, my own name. I did just not me. And we just fell in love with the name as soon as we saw it, and the whole branding and everything just worked. And
And in terms of your presence, so what does Kingsdene look like today as a company then?
So we have our largest office is Manchester, which is obviously on Deansgate, and we have sales, lettings and property management. We've also got a smaller team in Leeds.
That's the question I was going to ask you.
So we've got a very small team in Leeds we're very lucky that they still sit in the JLL office at the moment, but we are about to sign terms. Touch wood, let's not jinx that one today. About to sign terms on a new office in Leeds, hopefully this week. So I'm going to.
Is that a shop or an office?
So it's an office, but it has got a small bay window. In a really cute. It's not necessarily got a massive amount of footfall, but I don't think you need that particularly now. In Manchester, we do.
Yeah, it's weird. That's a really good point, actually, because I say, no, you don't need it, but actually you've got a really nice presence on Dean.
Yeah, and that, like I say, that's estate agent alley, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else other than Deansgate in Manchester. But in Leeds, it is a very different market. So we've got this new office. It's an office, but with a bay window, so we can have a bit of a shop front. But it's very much more about having our own office, our own base. Leeds is where I really want to grow the business. I think,
as you know, we're big in Leeds, and somebody only said Peter, and maybe this came from Peter at P1, who's the personal trainer we're going to talk about in a minute. But he was very pro Leeds and said it's the next big market. But maybe
So he's just listened to a.
That's
I
what
think
I'm
he's
wondering.
listened to a property podcast, and maybe I've said something to him. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's a big opportunity in Leeds, and yeah, I don't. There isn't really anyone who does what we do.
It
in
feels
Leeds.
really undercated for.
Yeah.
Leeds does feel, and it still feels also a bit like people still work in Liverpool and Leeds from Manchester as well, or cover those areas, whereas Leeds is big enough to be able to stand on its own 2 feet.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic city. Like, it is an incredible. The more, I mean, I go up there like every other week, and I really like it as a city. Like, it's lovely, but it just needs. And it's coming. You can see it's coming. I think it's just taking a lot longer than Manchester did.
Do you cover Liverpool?
Yeah, so we've still got a small sort of lettings portfolio in Liverpool that we have.
But no one's sitting there.
Well, we have one lady who sits in Liverpool and looks after that. So, yeah.
And in terms of scale of the business, I don't know what parameters to ask. I mean, properties under management?
1,200.
Wow. Okay. And properties, I was going to say properties on the market, as in for sale and for let, but I bet you've got nothing for let, have you, at the moment? See, this is there's a whole podcast.
We probably have it varies every single day.
Yeah, but it's pretty much they all go out the front door.
Yeah.
And then for sale?
We've got what we've got at the moment, 5 live new home schemes at the moment for sale. So, and that's all completed stock.
Oh, it's completed stock.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondary market? Do you sell secondary?
Yeah. That's very tricky at the moment.
Is it really?
So tricky. Just the cladding problems are just causing absolute chaos.
And stagnated, the whole thing stagnated.
Yeah. It's starting to move a little bit now. Like, I'm sure you've seen as you walk around the city, there's scaffolding around so many old resi buildings now. So it's starting to get a little bit better, but then of course new legislation comes in and changes it all again. Yeah. The secondhand market is very tough. If you want to sell at the moment, it's very, very tough.
And that with mortgages as well.
Well, and conveyancing takes 6 months at the moment, probably. It's very, very painful.
That's really interesting. That's probably the most insightful thing so far in terms of knowing what's going on. Is very tricky.
And these poor people who are literally stuck in a flat that they can't sell, it's awful unless they rent it.
One of our team here was renting an apartment in Castlefield and had scaffolding up, I think, for 3 years, which is phenomenal. No daylight, his rent was very cheap, but, I can't see there's any other benefits there at all. So in terms of the new product that you're selling, so where, if you, of let's say 100 apartments in one building, how would that be split internationally and domestically and
occupiers? At the moment, because a lot of our product is completed, it's more domestic owner occupiers. But we're Manchester New Square, for example, on sort of Whitworth Street, that area, that's very popular with the overseas market because it's so close to the university. So it kind of depends on where properties are, buildings are, as to what the demographic is. But generally, completed product is more suited to owner occupiers.
And do you get involved in the build-to-rent market?
Yeah, we still look after the Town Centre Securities building, Burlington House. Amazing, that's a fantastic scheme. Like that scheme actually did really well during COVID because the apartments were bigger. And it's obviously in a lovely location in like posh Northern Quarter as I class it. And big, and people, and I walk past there every day to go home. And you still see people working from home there because the apartments are that much bigger, and they spent more money on the furniture, the internals. So it's really stood the test of time. It's a fantastic scheme. I must no one would ever build that scheme today.
But it's also quite hidden away.
Yeah, it's quiet. Well, apart from all the development opposite now, but
there's 2 schemes being built next door.
And I walk that. I take my life into my hands every time I walk down that road now.
Well, they seem to be in the ground a long time on those, and but I didn't know where it was. Even though I'd spoken about it, I've heard about it lots, and I discovered it, and I was quite surprised. I think also with die cast opening.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
that's really
it's on the route.
changed. Yeah.
It's on the route now. All of a sudden, that's how I passed. I've been to die cast a couple
Yeah.
of times, and it was on the way out there. I walked past it, so you would no other reason to go out there. But that's changed everything now.
Yeah.
What's the ambition for Kingsdene? So the JLL have got all their London businesses. Why don't you go and grow into those?
No, London's not for me. No, the north is where we'll concentrate the business. And like I say, Leeds is probably Leeds is our next big growth area.
Yeah.
And that's where we do really, really want to.
And Birmingham?
Never say never to Birmingham, but yeah, I tried at JLL for probably 2 or 3 years to get into Birmingham, and it's a very strange market. I don't know, it's not Manchester nor is it London. So it's kind of, it's a bizarre city, if I'm honest.
Looking
Sorry,
at
anyone.
Burlington House as an example on build to rent,
Yeah.
do you see a differentiation in rents or demand, or is there any differentiation between a PRS scheme or PRS client and a build to rent client? Because when we first got involved in build to rent, we used to call it PRS. Yeah. And the difference between PRS is you might be singular landlords, as in, or multiple, but they might be in a building of 400 apartments, yeah, but you have an individual PRS unit in there, as opposed to all the build to rent units being owned by one landlord. Is there a differentiation in terms of economies of scale, or because they said there was going to be a premium in the rents and everything else? Has that manifested itself?
I don't think so personally, no. I think it's more to do with sort of the amenity in the building and how well kept it is.
Yeah.
And Burlington still gets incredible rents, even though there is very little amenity. It literally has a concierge and a tiny little residence lounge, but it's in a great location. Like I say, the apartments are bigger. It depends what you want,
yeah,
whereas some people do want, the bells and whistles of a build to rent scheme with, gyms, co-working spaces, cinema rooms, but ultimately you're paying extra for that. So it kind of depends what you want, from your rent, really.
And has the area you cover expanded massively from 10 years ago, in the sense of it was just city core previously? Where's your most...
Ancoats is like a prime example. I live in Ancoats, New Islington, and I have done for the last 10 years. And I moved into Royal Mills before there was anything in Ancoats. There was nothing in Ancoats.
Did you move into Royal Mills? Okay.
Yeah, so I moved into Royal Mills in 2014, and there was nothing. There was one tiny little sandwich shop, breakfast shop.
That's
was it.
Really
literally nothing. And now look at it.
Well, our listeners ought to go, if they haven't been, go and name some of the restaurants. There are some super restaurants.
Rudy's, Counter House, Elnacott.
Yeah, Elnacott.
Yeah, I'm a restaurant queen, so so many. Well, Marna, like Manchester's Michelin-starred restaurant in Ancoats,
and it's got a couple of supermarkets, as in it's got a co-op, is it?
Co-op, Aldi across the road.
Yeah, of course.
And
that's all happened in 10 years.
In 10 years, and less really, probably 6 to 8. And it's phenomenal. And what FEC are doing down at New Victoria, unbelievable. Like a part of town that no one would have gone to.
Well, I randomly came into town on Sunday night because I stayed over. I was early because I arrived from somewhere else, so I went for a walk, and I went up and saw everybody sitting out on the square, and it was Sunday evening, and it was party atmosphere. It was like a Saturday night.
Was that before the storm?
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
it was beautiful.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But you just look at how the city's grown.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. Or Salford, I often say, like, the best view of Manchester is actually from across the river. In Salford, look at what Muse have done at New Bailey, and the factory. It's phenomenal, like what's happened at that part of town.
And in terms of mortgage rates, I mean, we've today I've been in meetings and we've talked a lot about interest rates and mortgages availability, and how difficult it is to get a mortgage that actually is functional for what you want and the premiums people have to pay. Is there an issue in buildings that have got international investors in terms of trying to get hold? Can they get hold of mortgages themselves in terms of in those buildings, or do they sort it out domestically? Or
no, they can. Yeah, they can. There's less choice.
Product, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's always a product.
But there's always a product for everyone. Yeah, I think one of So interest rates is a problem at the moment, but so is service charge. So service charges have gone
Okay.
up exponentially
Have they
recently.
really?
Yeah, just insurance, mainly insurance, that we all know. Like our
Yeah.
house insurance has gone up, our car insurance has gone up, like insurance has gone really expensive. So building insurance on service charges is huge. Yeah,
Mine's gone up 4 times,
yeah,
as in 4, multiplier of 4.
yeah. So if you've got if you've had a mortgage that's come off a fixed, and so your mortgage has gone up, your service charge has gone up, like affordability it's tough,
Yeah, that's
very
really
tough.
interesting. And I didn't know about service charge. I knew. So on the interest rates, I mean, what's your crystal ball saying?
I mean, I was really hoping for them to come down in June, but I don't know. I don't know whether we've got to wait for a general election
Yeah.
or who knows.
The thing is, it's not so much the immediate pain on the changes, it's people's fixed rates changing. And I think you're certainly talking to colleagues here, people coming off their fixed rates, coming into floating rates or margin above base, and it's causing all sorts of issues. And that's just, for the people we chat to. So it's goodness knows what it's doing for
I
investors.
think we're seeing the pain more now as well, because when interest rates first went up, like you say, everyone was on fixed rates, so it didn't really affect people straight away, and you're kind of a bit oblivious to it. And it's only when it actually happens, and you're like, this is actually costing me another £1,000 a month.
Yeah.
It's extortionate.
The people actually, I know some people who are paying to, paying to hold their properties.
Yeah.
So they're let income producing, but with their service charge and their interest rate change, they're actually paying to hold properties. So
yeah, well, we've had quite a lot of landlords actually approach us asking if we'll put their property on the market, but we've said you are actually better still renting it out, because at the moment there isn't a market for that product.
I don't think this is known. I think this is what's interesting about having this conversation, is that I think a lot of people are unaware of these movements, these changes in the market and what's happening. So, and it's happening both in commercial property as well to an extent. So there is the pain there, but it's not spoken about much. People don't know about it much. So let's look at the letting market. So you've got, say, 1,200 homes under management, and the turnover over those. How often you've got to let those?
Well, bizarrely at the moment, most people are renewing just because because they're so scared that if they give up their flat, they're going to have to go and pay an extra £100 a month somewhere else. And this
At least.
yeah. I mean, last year it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, is it?
It was, we're seeing up to £1,800 for one beds. In some of the new £1,800 for a one bed. It's just crazy. And that's in like the new high rise down at New Jackson and places like that. And it's like, where does it go? That's like London prices. So we have actually seen like a lot of people renewing and just staying where they are, just so that they know what rent they're paying.
But landlords as well, it's a difficult one, because they run the risk of saying, right, well, it's a new price that's going to be £100, a month more, whatever, and then the tenant going, well, I'm going to leave, but actually then the tenant can't find anywhere. It's a delicate balance.
We've seen quite a lot of people like hand their notice in to leave, realize they can't find anywhere, and actually retract it.
It's a full-time job trying to find an apartment. I mean, London's impossible
at this time,
but Manchester's very difficult as well, isn't it?
Now, especially now with so when you get to sort of June, July, August, September are our busiest months. Well, even October, just because of international students as well.
And are people physically viewing properties these days?
But yeah, we won't do.
You won't?
We won't do it without. No.
But that's a lot of legwork as well.
Oh, yeah.
So,
the guys do thousands of steps a day. They love it.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. And the market in terms of rental growth, I mean, so I think people were modelling in 3% in rental growth, and it was in reality over 10%. Was that right?
Yeah.
And then what's the forecast going forward?
I always say it can't go. It just can't carry on, but it seems to. And we haven't really seen, like, it just takes so long for schemes to come online. Yeah. And there is still a huge demand, like this city is. So, and I think since, especially this work from home scenario as well, like there are a lot of people who used to live in London who don't live in London anymore, because they can just travel there 2 days a week, and they just stay in Manchester now. Overseas students, like we were talking about, Manchester is such a hot city. people love to come to Manchester. Like, the graduate retention rate is phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, people love staying here. And for me, it's a really affordable city that you can walk everywhere. You don't have to get on the tube. Yeah, it doesn't cost you a fortune to get around the city. So I always think it is, for a student, a graduate, it is a really,
And restaurants are cheap. You know, you got to go to the right restaurants, but
to a point.
it's phenomenal. I always think how cheap eating out is.
Yeah, yeah.
I've had a theory, which is that I think I'm wrong after now listening to you, but I'll tell you my theory. I've got a theory that build to rent will carry on. People say build to rent can't carry on the current rate because there'll be no demand for all these apartments that are being built. But my theory is that for as long as there is one PRS unit available, there'll be a market for build to rent because people would always rather be in build to rent than PRS. But I think what I'm talking about, probably listening to you, is I'm not talking about PRS where you're representing a client that probably never has been to the property, because it's probably just like build to rent because it's a professional position.
Right,
But I'm thinking about PRS where they're in a 2003, 2004, 2005 built building, which has got problems and is a bit flaky. And I think for as long as there's rentals of those available, there'll always be a build to rent market. But in terms of supply, you're talking about how long things take to come online. That is probably the answer to the build to rent. There will always be demand because things take so long to happen.
Yeah, particularly now. And,
There's nothing. Everything's fallen off a cliff a bit, really.
It's slowed down, definitely. And there are only so many developers in this city who can build quickly.
Yeah.
And particularly at the moment with, build costs being as they are and the planning issues that we have, and there are only so many developers that can build.
Change the subject completely. Do you do shared equity sales for Clarion and people like that? Or is that done in-house by Clarion?
Clarion do shared ownership. In-house, but we do help them a little bit with that, and if we've got a customer who doesn't meet the affordability criteria for an outright sale, then we'll obviously pass them to Clarion for shared ownership. Clarion have had fantastic success with that. Their scheme in New Islington is pretty much sold out with shared ownership. It's just it's been an education process for the general public because they don't know what shared ownership is.
Well, some variations as well on the theme, isn't there?
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of people think that you're actually sharing with someone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's been some myths to bust.
Because we've had people, we're doing the Clarion scheme in next door to Old Trafford cricket ground, and we've had direct emails to Glenbrook asking to take some of the units. Or take a unit on shared ownership, and it's really interesting because people are really desperate, and
it's a very affordable way to get on the ladder. You can buy a share of a property, 30%, 35% of a share of a property.
Yeah. So
if you're buying a one bed, you can be buying, I think, at £80,000.
Yeah.
What can you buy?
Absolutely.
And living in a city. So it's a really, really, and it's kind of helped because with having no first time buyer help from the government at the moment, no help to buy or anything like that.
It's all being phased out. Yeah.
That's had a massive effect on the market.
Interesting.
There's just they just have to rely on their parents for the deposit.
Yeah, and they're not going to be able to. The majority of people aren't going to be able to have that luxury. So
no. So shared ownership's been really, really good for Manchester, definitely.
So outside of work, we've got one thing in common here, which is P1.
Yeah.
Talk to us about P1.
So P1, I love P1.
How do you find P1? First of all, what is P1? Because listen to our other podcast, everybody, because they were the last podcast, I think, on the Glenbrook.
So P1 is a group personal training gym based in the city centre. So I've always, for a long time now, been really into exercise and training, and I love resistance training, weight training. And I had a PT for a very long time, which during COVID, I realised how much money that PT was costing me.
Where was that?
Absolutely insane. In Piccadilly, or FLF. And also my PT there left and went to train at a gym in Stockport, which wasn't really feasible. But mainly due to the fact that I realised how much money I'd saved during COVID. I just realised it wasn't sustainable. But I absolutely loved it. And then I think it must have been an algorithm on my Instagram stories. that P1 kept like popping up, but also George Oakey from JLL, when he lived in the city, he went to P1. So I joined P1 in April 21, I think it was. So 3 years later. Still, I love it. Love it.
And the classes, how does it work in terms? Do you sign up to specific classes, or do you buy 3 a week, or how?
So it's monthly. So you do your first month as like a trial, and then if you enjoy it, then you can sign up to a monthly membership, which is 12. I do 12 sessions a month.
Okay.
So and they run at all sort of times during the day. So anything from 6:30 till, I think, I don't train in the evenings, but I think 7:30 in the evening.
I do see the most amazing thing is these early sessions.
Oh yeah.
We go 12 to 1 twice a week, and it's since Christmas we've been doing it as a team, and it's different to anything I've ever done before.
It's
I'm an old fogey, so
I train at 6:30.
Oh, do you?
In the morning? Yeah.
That's keen. It's even keener.
Farmer's daughter there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're
I'm always awake anyway.
Yeah, so P1's your passion. Traveling you've spoken about. So I love your stories about having hung around after a week of sales in Hong Kong.
After realizing that when you don't need to get on an aeroplane on a Thursday and fly back on a Sunday night. I suddenly realized that I should actually be staying a little bit longer and enjoying to see these places. So I've been to Bali. Where else were we in? Vietnam.
How many of these trips were you doing a year? I mean, how many times were you going abroad?
There was one time where I literally was just like on and off a plane, like every weekend. Like it was crazy. I really wished I'd had a tally of how many weekends I did, because a lot. I flew back early I had to fly back early one weekend because it was my niece. I was godmother for my niece at her christening, and my plane got delayed. And I nearly missed my connection. I was flying BA back to London, and I nearly missed my connection. I made it by the skin of my teeth. You've never seen anyone get off a plane so quick in all of your life. But I was like, I'm not going to make this christening. My family are going to hate me. It's just the things you did. It was incredible.
Yeah, and the other added pressure is when the client comes out with you, I suspect, because
but you kind of need the client there because they can make the decision. Because sometimes if you've got an offer that isn't quite where you need it to be,
Because my perception is that there would be no offers. It's very much a fait accompli in terms of that is the price. But is there?
They like to negotiate.
Okay, that's really interesting.
And sometimes it's only it's a furniture pack or it's legal fees or no. They like to think that
a deal,
and they know you're there for the weekend to do sales, so they know there's always a deal to be done. Yeah,
that's really interesting. The farm, you get back to the farm?
Yeah, I try and go back as much as I can. Yeah, I like my brother, his wife, and they've got 2 boys as well. So get to see those guys a lot.
And where do you see Kingsdene in 10 years' time then?
10 years' time. I'm only thinking about 5 years' time. I can only work in 5-year chunks. I'd like to see Manchester, obviously, going from strength to strength and continuing what we've done in Manchester. Leeds to be not as big as, I think one of our aims is to have 2,000 properties under management in 5 years' time.
That's easy.
So that's the plan.
You'll nail them.
That we're working towards. Just grow the team and just keep growing and seeing where it goes.
I've learned a lot today.
Good.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been lovely.
I'm so pleased to be on the fringes of your business and see the success of it, and hopefully see it grow in the future, but also learn about the balance you have in life as well, which is really good. And we're both supporters of P1. So thank you very much for coming and joining us and learning lots about the journey to the arrival at Kingsdene. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.